Nigeria is sub-Saharan Africa's largest economy and relies heavily on oil as its main source of foreign exchange earnings and government revenues. Following the 2008-2009 global financial crisis, the banking sector was effectively recapitalized and regulated. Since then, Nigeria's economic growth has been driven by growth in agriculture, telecommunications and services. And now to review the state of the performance of the economy in 2019, I have Tilewa Adebajo. He's an investment banker and economist. Thank you so much for joining me in the studio.
Thank you. Compliments of the season.
Compliments of the season.
Merry Christmas in advance.
Same to you. Same to you. Thank you so much for joining us once again. All right, so straight to it. Let's get your opinion regarding the Nigerian economic space in the year 2019.
Well, let's take a look at where we're coming from. When this regime took over in the first set of elections, there were serious challenges and the economy actually went into a recession.
Yes.
There was a drop on the GDP from a high of 6.5% to minus 2.3%. At that point in time, the government embarked on what we call the Economic Recovery Growth Plan, which it outlined its plans to be able to not only reflect the economy, but also to be able to put the economy on a growth trajectory. So it's important we look at what they have accomplished with the plan they set out to do. If we look at this now, we're going into the year 2020, this whole 2020 year whereby everything is supposed to be perfect in Nigeria with all the visions that we've done and the plans. The economy was expected to grow at 5% this year and 7% next year, which is 2020.
Exactly.
But what has happened? The economy has grown only by about 2.5%. I think that's about the best we've been able to achieve in terms of growth. But again, the trajectory on growth has been positive, but unfortunately, the rate of our population growth is 3%. So 2.5% growth in Nigeria is not anything that is meaningful. And that is why we have over 100 million Nigerians in poverty. In order for us to have meaningful growth, we have to have at least growth of about 5.5 to 6%, which is growth that is more than our population growth. Yes, we remain not only the biggest economy in Africa, Lagos state alone remains the 5th largest economy in Africa, but unfortunately, our population, instead of being an asset, has become a liability because you have 100 million people in poverty that do not have the purchasing power or the spending power that can use to stimulate growth and grow the economy. Also, we can see that the policies of the government over the last 4 years or the 3 years has not really impacted on their own plans in terms of what they've done. So I think it's important that when we take a look at the numbers this year, what even makes it worse also is the rising debt profile, which is becoming unsustainable. Our debt burden has gone from about $50 billion to now close to about $80 billion in just for a space of about 3.5 years. And right now there's planned borrowing of another 30 billion that will take the borrowing to over $100 billion. And what's happening? The government is struggling on the fiscal side. You can see that there's massive need for some sort of fiscal restructuring. It's very critical at this stage because 65% of government revenues is going towards debt service. You know, that is clearly not a sustainable
Which I mean poses like a red light for us as an economy within the economic space. Now, you did speak about our growth rate.
Yes.
Now, when you take a look at other African countries, talking about Ivory Coast, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Senegal, you see them growing at about 7%, and some of them have gone ahead to go as close as 8 point something percent, right? But then we see Nigeria still within the 2 and 2.5 margin. Is there a situation whereby the bottlenecks have still not been addressed?
Well, when you talk about bottlenecks, it's like where is the stimulus that is going to grow the economy? I'll assume that's what you mean by that. Clearly, you have a problem on the fiscal side. The government revenues are dwindling. Every budget within this administration or this regime has been a deficit budget in financing, and we're just piling up debt. But we're not seeing the returns. Even all the investment in infrastructure, like the Abuja-Kaduna rail that was talked about, it's not operating at a profit. I mean, that railroad in itself, how much revenues are they collecting on that revenues to be able to service that debt? Is it viable? Have they concessioned it out? Have they made it commercial? So when you talk about even investment in the infrastructure, the infrastructure you've invested in, where are the returns? All the airports that were built, how much is FAN remitting back to the government to be able to pay off the debts that was borrowed to develop all those airports across the country? They are generating revenue. So these are the questions we need to ask because you have problems, major problems on the fiscal side. On the monetary side, the central bank has tried its best to be able to maintain the rates, to be able to maintain financial stability. But you cannot remain in the same spot because, at your MPR at 14%, you're going to have to drop rates sometimes to be able to stimulate growth.
I know they reduced it to 13.5%, but yes, it looks as though it's not having an effect on the economy as expected.
They consider the impact is not there. And now they're beginning to try to force the banks to lend by
loan-to-deposit ratio,
by notching up the loan-to-deposit ratios. But again, the banks also have to be very careful. If you have an economy that is only growing at 2.5%, over 100 million people in poverty, where is the purchasing power? So if banks go to lend, then they might actually lose the money and create more bad loans. So the banks also have to be very extremely careful because they've had the bad experience with the oil and gas loans which they gave out. And so these are lessons that have to be learned the hard way. So an economy that is not growing also has its inherent risks, especially to the credit system. Now we've taken a look at not only the fiscal policy, but the monetary policy. We also have to take a look at the trade policy and the investment policy. And you can see that the attempt to attack trade policy or do something about trade policy has now led to the border closures. So that is in an attempt to be able to address those issues with trade policy, which is positive on the short term. But it's important that you monitor what's going through the border. It's not about shutting the borders, but to ensure that the right things are going in and coming out of your border. That is what's important. As long as the right things are coming in and out of the borders, then we really don't have too much of a problem. But in order for us to grow this economy, it's important that we maintain that discipline between fiscal policy, which is, where the problem is right now, monetary policy, trade policy, and investment policy. If we can combine those four and synchronize those spots properly, then you can put in policies that will grow the economy. So this economic recovery growth plan needs to go back to the drawing board. I believe there's a new economic management team that has been set up. So let them charge them with revising that economic recovery growth plan and come out with new policies that can create sustainable growth. But if you take a look at the outlook of Nigeria for 2020, it's not very positive. Because while our credit ratings have maintained our rating, the outlook for Nigeria, unfortunately, has been downgraded from stable to negative by the top credit rating agencies. And on the international markets, that's not a very good signal.
Because at the end of the day, we were trying to also compete globally with, the global market. Finally, because of time, of course, we still have there's still the conversation around debt sustainability. Do you think, or would you suggest that we require some form of innovative financing structure to help us get out of the situation of debt for which we find ourselves today?
No. My concern right now is that the Fiscal Responsibility Act has been violated. So what I would like to see is a debate in the Senate and in the House of Reps on where we stand with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. With this movement of debt at 80 billion going to 110 billion, clearly the current limits have been violated. And this whole budget might be in violation of that Fiscal Responsibility Act. And it's important that that debate goes on and we reset those limits. Nigeria remains the largest economy in Africa. And the challenge we have in this economy is a powerhouse, is to be able to find the right policies and the leadership to grow this economy at 6% to the benefit of Nigerians and taking 100 million Nigerians out of poverty back into sustainability. Then they begin to have purchasing power and sustainability. With 35% unemployment, these are also key challenges that we need to address to be able to get our economy on the right track.
All right, thank you so much. Because of time, that's all we can have. But thanks for joining us in the studio. Thank you so much.